They told you to be good, to be kind, to follow the rules, help others, suppress anger and apologize for wanting more. They told you there was a clear line between good and evil, between what should be done and what must never be done. And for a while, you believed it. You believed that being moral meant being safe, that being virtuous meant being loved, that if you conformed to the expectations, the world would reward you. But Nietzsche, with his hammer of truth, shattered this illusion. He stood on the ruins of decaying dogmas and whispered a sentence that still echoes like thunder through the modern soul. God is dead. But he wasn't speaking of theology. He wasn't merely rejecting religion. He was announcing the collapse of something far more pervasive, the moral scaffolding of Western thought. The death of God, for Nietzsche, meant the death of absolute morality. It meant that the commandments we had worshipped, the rigid ideas of good and evil, were no longer sacred. They were constructs, narratives, tools of control disguised as eternal truths. And if morality was a construction, then the values that governed your life could be lies. Here's the uncomfortable truth Nietzsche invites you to see. What you call good may simply be what keeps you weak. Society doesn't teach you to be strong. It teaches you to be tame. It doesn't teach you to think. It teaches you to obey, and morality, in its common form, becomes the leash. Nietzsche called this slave morality. It's a morality born not from strength, but from weakness, not from power, but from resentment. The oppressed, unable to rise, sanctify their condition. They make their suffering a badge of honor. Their submission becomes humility. Their fear becomes kindness. Their inability to fight back becomes forgiveness. And then they teach the strong to be ashamed of their strength, to feel guilty for desiring more, to feel evil for defying the herd. This is how values get reversed. Suddenly, the ambitious are called selfish, the independent are called arrogant, the intense are called dangerous, and the obedient, the meek, the self-erasing are lifted as moral ideals. But Nietzsche saw through it. He asked a question most are too afraid to ask. What if our highest values are the source of our deepest suffering? What if morality isn't a light, but a cage? What if the voice telling you to be a better person isn't your conscience, but the echo of a society that fears your awakening? That is the death of good and evil, not the birth of chaos, not the celebration of cruelty, but the beginning of self-authorship. When the old values fall, something terrifying and liberating emerges, the responsibility to create your own. And here lies the threshold, the great divide between the sleepwalker and the awakened. The sleepwalker clings to inherited virtues. He says, I must be kind, I must be liked, I must be moral. He avoids conflict, he pleases, he conforms, not out of love, but out of fear. But the awakened, the one who lets the false gods of morality die, he doesn't become immoral, he becomes real. He no longer asks, is this good? He asks, is this true to me? He no longer lives to be harmless, he lives to be whole. This is not easy. The world punishes those who escape the moral cage. They will call you cold. They will call you cruel. They will say you've lost your way, but you haven't. You've found it. A way that no longer forces you to mutilate your soul to fit in. A way where good and evil dissolve. And in their place, something ancient and fierce is reborn, your will, your fire, your unshakable center. Nietzsche doesn't give you rules. He gives you a mirror, and in that mirror you might see that much of what you thought was virtue was submission, much of what you thought was love was fear, and much of what you thought was good was simply the absence of risk. So if you feel something trembling inside you now, if you feel the old values cracking, if you feel the call to stop playing the role of the good one and start being someone real, then this is your moment. Let the old gods die. Let the old voices fade. Let the inherited morals fall away like dead skin, because only when you bury the illusion of good and evil can you begin to rise. There is a kind of morality that doesn't elevate. It poisons. It doesn't awaken. It sedates. It doesn't empower. It pacifies. Nietzsche called it slave morality, and perhaps without knowing it, you've been living inside it your whole life. This morality is not born from strength. It does not rise from self-respect or courage or vision. It is born from resentment, the slow-burning rage of the powerless, wrapped in the language of virtue. Imagine a man who cannot act, who cannot rise, who cannot take what he desires. He sees another, stronger, freer, feared, and he feels small. But he cannot admit that he is small. He cannot confess his envy. So he builds a new system, not of truth but of inversion. He calls the strong evil. He calls his own weakness good. He turns his lack of power into a moral ideal. And then he teaches the world that it is better to kneel than to stand, better to suffer than to strive, better to obey than to become. This is the trap. A morality that flatters your fear, your softness, your hesitation, and then calls it compassion. It is a morality that says, if I cannot be free, I will call freedom dangerous. If I cannot lead, I will teach that leadership is oppressive. If I cannot shine, I will worship darkness as a sacred virtue. And so the herd grows, a mass of quiet resentment hidden behind kind smiles and moral superiority, a collective agreement. We will not try to rise, and we will condemn anyone who does. They will praise humility, but punish authenticity. They will promote equality, but only when it means flattening the exceptional. They will claim to love peace, but secretly enjoy tearing down anyone who dares to climb. This is slave morality at work, not a philosophy of love, but a doctrine of control. Nietzsche saw it everywhere, in the churches that preached self-denial as holiness, in the schools that molded children to obey, not to think, in the systems that reward mediocrity and resent genius. He saw that morality had become a weapon, and the weapon was guilt. Guilt is the chain. It wraps around your potential. It whispers, how dare you want more? Who do you think you are to step outside the lines? Don't be selfish, be nice, be quiet, be like us. And so you shrink. Not because you lack the strength, but because you've been trained to feel ashamed of it. You stop speaking the truth that burns inside you. You apologize for taking up space. You pretend to be smaller than you are, just to make others comfortable. This isn't morality, it's spiritual suffocation. And yet, because it comes in the language of kindness and inclusion, you believe it's righteous. But righteousness without honesty is just manipulation in disguise. Nietzsche did not hate morality. He hated what morality had become, a tool for the weak to pull down the strong, for the bitter to disguise their bitterness as holiness, for the collective to punish the individual who dares to become more than a shadow. He believed that true morality does not come from doctrine. It comes from depth, from within, from the fire of a soul that refuses to bow. But to reach that place, you must see the trap you're in. You must see how often you say, I should, instead of I want. How often you avoid action not because it's wrong, but because it's uncomfortable. How often your conscience is not your own, but an echo of someone else's fear. When you begin to question that echo, something dangerous happens. You begin to reclaim your voice. You begin to remember that morality is not one size fits all, that greatness is not always polite, that truth is not always nice, and that you are not here to be pleasing. You are here to become whole. This doesn't mean harming others. Nietzsche wasn't advocating cruelty, but he understood that to be truly kind, to be truly ethical, you must first be free, because any goodness that comes from fear is not real. Any forgiveness that comes from weakness is just submission. Any peace that comes from passivity is temporary. Real morality is forged in inner conflict. It is chosen, not inherited. It is lived, not performed. And once you see the trap, once you feel the rusted chains of slave morality fall from your limbs, you don't become evil, you become dangerously alive. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, think with a fire that no one can fake. Not because you've become selfish, but because you've stopped lying, and suddenly you are no longer manipulable. You are no longer trapped by the fear of being bad, because now You're not asking what the herd thinks. You're asking what your soul demands. This is the beginning of freedom. And freedom is the birthplace of all true power. There is a power inside you. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for attention. It simply waits, like a flame beneath the ashes. But for most, it remains hidden, smothered by doubt, silenced by obedience, buried beneath years of moral conditioning and social fear. Nietzsche knew this power well. He called it the will to power. Not a hunger to control others, but a force of internal expansion, a primal urge to become more than what you were yesterday, to rise beyond the roles you've been given, to carve your own identity from the stone of existence. This strength is not given to you, it is awakened, and that awakening begins with a question. Whose voice have you been obeying all your life? The voice that says, don't speak too loudly, don't take risks, don't make people uncomfortable. Don't be too ambitious. Don't be too much. That voice is not your truth. It is a program, a whispered inheritance of fear passed from generation to generation. It teaches you to shrink, to fold, to compromise, until the only thing left of you is a shadow of what you might have been. To reclaim your strength, you must unlearn. Unlearn the need to be agreeable. Unlearn the guilt of saying no. Unlearn the shame of wanting more than survival. Unlearn the idea that being soft is the same as being good. Because sometimes the most moral thing you can do is reclaim your fire. To say without apology, I am not here to be small. I am not here to be liked. I am here to live fully, deeply, fiercely. And that terrifies people, because once you step into your strength, once you stop asking for permission, once you start speaking from a place no one else can touch, you expose the weakness in others. They will say you're arrogant, too intense, too direct, too confident. But what they really mean is, you're no longer under control. This is the danger of becoming strong. You begin to exist outside the rules that govern the herd. You walk through life differently. You make choices from the gut. You feel the weight of your decisions and carry it with your spine straight. You don't need approval. You don't beg for validation, because you've tasted something deeper than applause. You've tasted your own power. This kind of strength is not violent. It is not theatrical. It is grounded, quiet, unshakable. It is the kind of strength that can say no without raising its voice, that can walk away without explaining, that can stand alone without fear. And most of all, it is the kind of strength that creates. Nietzsche believed that the purpose of power was to create values, not follow them. To become not a follower of ethics, but a maker of meaning. To look at the world and say, none of this fits me, so I will build my own path. But this path comes at a cost. To reclaim your strength, you must betray the version of you that was built for approval. You must abandon comfort. You must face the silence of your own truth. And you must walk through the fire of self-confrontation without blinking. Most run from this. They return to the comfort of weakness. They say, I'm not ready, and maybe they're not. But if you are, if something in you has stirred, if the words you've heard feel less like philosophy and more like memory, then the time has come. Reclaim your voice, reclaim your wildness, reclaim the part of you that was never meant to kneel. Speak, even when your voice shakes. Act, even when no one claps. Stand, even when you're alone, because your strength was never supposed to come from others. It was meant to come from within. This is not easy. You will be misunderstood. You will be criticized. You will lose people, but you will gain something far more sacred, yourself. You are not here to live someone else's story. You are not here to be a reflection of the herd. You are not here to decorate your cage and call it a home. You are here to break the walls, to raise your voice, to burn the false layers, and to rise as the version of yourself that no one saw coming. And when that version stands tall, when it breathes without apology, when it acts from instinct, purpose, and clarity, you will understand what Nietzsche meant when he said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your why is your strength, and it's been waiting for you. You live in a world soaked in virtue. Everywhere you turn, you're told how to be a good person. Smile more, speak softly, be kind, be tolerant, be selfless, be agreeable. But behind this wall of kindness Something insidious hides, a system of control wrapped in moral language. Nietzsche saw it coming long before smartphones and hashtags. He understood the human tendency to dress fear as morality, to disguise conformity as ethics, and to turn social pressure into a tool of silent obedience. In the past, this pressure came from the pulpit. Now, it comes from your feed. You scroll, you consume, you compare, and slowly, without even noticing, you are being conditioned to behave, to adapt, to belong. Not because you believe, but because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. This is the new herd morality, a morality engineered by visibility. It punishes through silence, it disciplines through shame, and its golden rule is simple: don't disrupt the narrative. You are free, as long as your thoughts don't make anyone uncomfortable. You are brave, as long as your courage doesn't question the crowd. You are moral, as long as your goodness is visible, digestible, and socially approved. And so we perform, not just our lives, but our conscience. We post kindness, we share empathy, we adopt the right opinions. Not always because they are true, but because they are safe. But Nietzsche warned, a morality that feeds on fear is not morality. It's manipulation. It seduces you into silence. It convinces you that rebellion is selfish, that thinking for yourself is dangerous, that questioning is betrayal, and the punishment, not prison, not exile, but exclusion, to be cut off, unfollowed, dismissed, invisible. This is the power of modern morality. It doesn't need to coerce you. You coerce yourself. You second-guess your instincts. You censor your language. You smile when you want to scream. You nod when your gut says no. You comply, not because it's right, but because it's easier. But Nietzsche would ask, easier than what? Easier than truth? Easier than freedom? Easier than becoming? He believed that every time you betray your inner voice to serve the outer crowd, you lose a piece of your soul. Not dramatically, quietly, like a leak in the bottom of your being, until one day you don't recognize yourself, not because you've changed, but because you've been slowly erased. And this is what moral manipulation does best. It teaches you to disappear while feeling proud. It teaches you to abandon your power and call it humility. It teaches you to seek approval instead of authenticity. But authenticity for Nietzsche is not optional, it's essential. Without it, you are nothing but a mask, a curated profile, a rehearsed personality, a ghost echoing what the world wants to hear. To live beyond manipulation, you must become dangerous. Not violent, not reckless, but inwardly dangerous, so anchored in your own values that no trend can touch you. This begins with self-honesty. Ask yourself, who am I trying to please? What fear is behind my silence? What truth am I avoiding to keep the peace? These questions are uncomfortable. They disrupt the flow. They threaten the social order. But they are your way out. Because once you answer them, once you reclaim your right to question, to disagree, to walk alone, you are no longer trapped. You are no longer living by borrowed values. You are no longer playing a moral role. You are living a moral reality, and that reality may cost you. You may lose friends. You may lose followers. You may lose the illusion of harmony, but you will gain something that cannot be bought, the clarity of your own soul. This is not about being right, it's about being real, about choosing to think even when it hurts, about honoring your instincts even when they go against the tide, about standing still when the herd runs blind. Nietzsche didn't offer comfort, he offered confrontation, because only through confrontation do you find your edge, and only at the edge do you find your truth. The modern world may manipulate with kindness. It may demand obedience in the name of empathy. It may shame you into silence and call it peace. But somewhere inside you, the flame still burns. The will to speak, the will to rise, the will to stop performing and start living. Let it burn. Let it spread. Let it shatter every illusion that ever made you feel small. Because once you are no longer afraid of being misunderstood, you become impossible to manipulate. And when that day comes, you will know what Nietzsche meant when he said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Now it's your turn to struggle, not for rebellion, not for rage, but for truth, your truth. Even if you must stand alone, not everyone was meant to follow. Not everyone was meant to kneel. Not everyone was born to inherit values. Some were born to create them. Nietzsche spoke of such people. He called them Übermensch, the overman, the one who rises beyond the limits of the human as we know it. Not a superhero, not a tyrant, but a being who has broken free from the chains of inherited morality and now lives by a law forged from within. The overman is not governed by fear, guilt, or shame. He does not ask, "What will they think of me?" He does not submit to the opinions of the crowd. He walks alone, not out of bitterness, but because his path hasn't been walked before. This is the final threshold Nietzsche calls you to cross, not merely to reject false values, but to become the source of your own. This is the hardest freedom, because now you cannot blame anyone. There are no commandments, no universal laws, no inherited maps, only the blank page of your becoming. And from that blankness you must write. Write with your actions, with your choices, with the silent strength of a life that no longer apologizes for existing on its own terms. The overman does not live by approval. He lives by alignment, not with the world, but with himself. His ethics are not abstract. They are embodied. They are felt in the spine, in the gut, in the fire of intuition. They emerge from struggle, solitude, pain, and clarity. He does not ask, "Is this allowed?" He asks, "Is this true to me?" He does not seek to be loved. He seeks to be whole. And wholeness is not soft. It is sharp. It cuts away all that is false. It demands integrity with a sword-like precision. The overman does not desire safety. He desires truth. He will risk being misunderstood. He will face exile. He will choose solitude over compromise, because for him, the only hell is living a lie. So now the question is not what you believe, but what are you willing to become? Are you willing to betray your past self for the sake of your real self? Are you willing to endure discomfort for the sake of clarity? Are you willing to be seen as arrogant, rebellious, wrong, just to be honest? Because that is the path. That is the fire. That is the weight and wonder of becoming who you truly are. Not a reflection, not a reaction, not a role, but a presence, a force, a living act of creation. You are not here to recycle inherited truths. You are here to burn falsehood down and rise from the ashes as something the world does not yet have a name for. This is the overman's ethic. You owe the world nothing, but you owe yourself everything. So go, walk the ridge between freedom and madness. Let go of the borrowed morals. Stop waiting for permission and become. If this journey shook something inside you, if you feel like the words weren't just spoken, but remembered, then your awakening has already begun. There are more paths to walk, more truths to uncover, more masks to burn. Explore the other videos on this channel, each one a mirror, a flame, a challenge. You weren't born to follow, you were born to forge. So keep walking, seeker, keep burning, and remember, the path is yours, but you're not walking it alone. Click on the next video. Your transformation continues.